Welcome to chapter 15 of Genesis. I am really stoked and excited for this chapter because this chapter, it's, well, all the chapters are good, but here we begin to see basically the fulfillment of Messiah. You're going to see a full circle at the end. And I love the fact that it starts with the covenant with Abram. So this chapter, like I said, it's amazing. Get ready to take notes. If you are catching the replay later, I exhort you pause as many times as you need to. This is not something to go through it quickly. This is something to truly take your time and digest the bread of life, digest his word, analyze everything, connect all the precepts that I will be sharing with you on your own, and let his Holy Spirit reveal his truth to you personally, his mysteries. Because his word is alive and it's perfection. And when I'm telling you, if you've been studying alongside with us from the very beginning, getting to this point, it's I don't even know. I don't even have a word. It's a must. Like this chapter 15, I want to say is the highlight of the entire word. And you might say, what do you mean the highlight of the entire scriptures? Obviously, there's highlights in every chapter and every part that we read. Again, it's a double-edged sword and it's alive. But understanding what takes place on chapter 15 of Genesis, it's going to delineate the entire word for you. It's going to set you in a place where you have no other where to go but to him. It is his covenant, and I'm going to try my best to the best of my ability. I pray that his ruach, his Holy Spirit, leads me to explain this to you guys so you understand it as a child. So Abba, give me your grace to explain this topic, but it is beautiful to see where we come from, what happened in the midst, in the middle, and where we are headed. So having said that, we're going to go ahead and begin reading chapter 15 of Genesis in its entirety. So if one of you could read it loud and clear.
I'll read it.
Read it. Thank
After
you.
these things, the word of the Most High came to Abram in a vision, saying, Do not be afraid, Abram, I am your shield, your exceedingly great reward. But Abram said, the Most High, what will you give me, seeing I go childless, and the heir of my house is Eliezer of Damascus? Then Abram said, Look, you have given me no offspring. Indeed, one born in my house is my heir. And behold, the word of the Most High came to him, saying, This one shall not be your heir, but one who will come from your own body shall be your heir. Then he brought him outside and said, Look now toward heaven, and count the stars if you are able to number them. And he said to him, So shall your descendants be. And he believed in the Most High, and he accounted it to him for righteousness. Then he said to him, I am the Most High who brought you out of Ur of Chaldeans to give you this land to inherit it. And he said, Abba, how shall I know that I will inherit it?
I'm gonna scroll up. Hold on.
So he said to him, Bring me a 3-year-old heifer and a 3-year-old female goat, a 3-year-old ram, a turtle dove, and a young pigeon. Then he brought all these to him and cut them in two down the middle and placed each piece opposite the other, but he did not cut the birds in two. And when the vultures came down on the carcasses, Abram drove them away. Now when the sun was going down, a deep sleep fell upon Abram, and behold, horror and great darkness fell upon him. Then he said to Abram, Know certainly that your descendants will be strangers in a land that is not theirs, and will serve them, and they will afflict them 400 years. And also the nation whom they serve I will judge. Afterward they shall come out with great possessions. Now as for you, you shall go to your fathers in peace. You shall be buried at a good old age. But in the fourth generation they shall return here, for the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet complete. And it came to pass when the sun went down and it was dark, that behold, there appeared a smoking oven and a burning torch that passed between those pieces. On the same day, the Most High made a covenant with Abram, saying, To your descendants I have given this land from the river of Egypt to the great river, the river Euphrates. The Kenites, the Kenizzites, the Cadmonites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, and the Rephaim, the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Girgashites, and the Jebusites.
Very good. I mean, thank you, Alina, for reading. So here we start off the bat. And by the way, I'm going to give a brief introduction to the chapter, but I am going to bring in the Targums immediately on verse 1, just so you could see the detail that the Targums together with Joshua. We're not going to read off of Joshua today because it confirms on the Targum, so I'd just rather read from there. But so you could see the details that connect 14 and 15 beautifully. Okay, but let me just go ahead and give an introduction to the chapter. And we're gonna go ahead and begin making our connections. So Genesis 15. And like I said, this begins the covenant, is the beginning of the covenant of the Most High, right? The promises spoken in Genesis 12 become covenant in Genesis 15. And what was spoken in Genesis 12? Again, it was the promise that Abraham, that, well, he wasn't Abraham yet, but Abraham would be basically the father of the nations. Basically, like as the sand of the sea and as the stars of the heavens, right? So here we see in chapter 15, it becomes a thing, like he solidifies the promise and brings it into a covenant, right? So Abram has left his land. We know that. He has obeyed. He has fought battles. We just saw that last week on chapter 14. He has refused earthly wealth, and yet he still has no son. So give me 1 second, guys. Hi, Danny. I just muted you. Sorry. So, like I was saying, um, this chapter answers the tension between promise and delay. Here we see a few things. We see the Most High speaks into fear, faith counted as righteousness, and we're going to break it down obviously with scripture as we move along. But we also see a covenant sealed by fire and also blood. I didn't include it here, but we see it's fire and blood. A prophecy of suffering before inheritance. So pay attention to those themes that we find within this chapter, right? And Genesis 15 teaches that the Most High does not rush fulfillment, but he never forgets his word. And that is key for us. So keep that in mind. So before Sinai, before Egypt, before the nation of Israel, there was a promise. And that's where we begin in chapter 15. So that's why I said at the beginning, understanding chapter 15 will give you clarity for the rest of our storyline through his perfect word. So let's begin making some connections. Off the bat, like I said, I'm gonna read. I'm gonna read off of Targums. So right here, just so you see, we have verse 1. After these things, the word of the Adon came, the word of the Most High came to Abram in a vision, saying, "Do not be afraid, Abram. I am." And we know, by the way, if you've been studying with us, you already know that I am is Haya, right? I am that I am. It's later on when he tells Moses that is his name forever, right? So I am Haya, your shield, your exceedingly great reward. So off the bat, the word, who is the word? Who's been paying attention here? Who is the word of the Most High? Mashiach, right? The Messiah, our Savior. He says, I am, right? Haya, your shield, your exceedingly great reward. And why do I take a pause here? Because we're going to see more context of this line in the Targums. So let's read off the Targums, the Targumim, right? From the Aramaic, much older translation. Look at what it says. After these words, and by the way, this is the exact same chapter that we just read, chapter 15, but a lot more detail found in here, right? So after these words, when the kings had gathered together, and by the way, this is connecting 14. Remember the kings, including Melchizedek, we spoke about it last week, right? The kings had gathered together and had fallen before Abram, and 4 kings had been slain, and 9 hosts brought back. Abram reasoned in his heart and said, "Woe to me, because I have received the reward of my appointments in this world and have no portion in the world to come." Remember, I'm going to connect that beautifully with last week's study. Remember what Abram rejected the riches from the king. And he much rather have the blessing of the Most High, right? Which is, we spoke about that he did not care for this worldly riches, right? But he's saying here in the Targums, he's saying, woe to me, because I have received the reward of my appointments in this world, but I have no portion in the world to come. And what is the world to come? Eternal life in the New Jerusalem. That's what he cared for. So he continues, or peradventure, the brethren and friends of those who have been slain will combine in legions and come against me, or that at that time there was found with me the reward of a little righteousness, so that they fell before me. But the second time reward may not be found with me, and by me the name of the heavens may be profaned. Thereupon was the word, check this out, this is talking about Messiah, was the word of the Most High with Abram in a vision, saying, fear not. For if these men should gather together in legions and come against thee, my word, meaning Messiah, will be thy shield. And also, if these fall before thee in this world, the reward of thy good works shall be kept and be prepared before me in the world to come, great exceedingly. So I don't know if you guys, I know we read a lot, okay? But what we see the connection here, I'm gonna go back to the canon. Here we see he just goes straight into do not be afraid, meaning fear not, Abraham. I am your shield, your exceedingly great reward. But you see how the context gives so much more, that the reason why he tells him off the bat, do not be afraid, is because Abraham is fearing, like, what happens if I don't get a reward in eternity? And what happens if these kings then come after me and there's not enough like righteousness found within me? So he's like battling these thoughts. The Most High, meaning the word of the Most High, does not just come to him saying, "Do not be afraid" for no reason. Here in the Targums, we see there was a reason. And he tells him, fear not, for if these men, which were the kings of the nations, right, should gather together in legions and come against thee, my word will be thy shield. So you see the difference in the context. My word, represented in his name, I am, Haya, right? My word shall be thy shield. And also, if these fall before thee in this world, the reward of thy good works. The reward of your good works shall be kept and prepared before me in the world to come, meaning in eternity, great and exceedingly. So, in other words, your good works, your obedience will carry from this life onto eternity. So, that's what he's telling you. I am your reward. If you obey me, I am the reward. I don't know if that makes, to me, that made so much more sense, and it's so much clearer to read it in the context, right? So connecting, I'm just going to connect a few Bible verses to verse 1 in the regular canon. We have Genesis right there, verse 4 on chapter 15. And behold, the word of the Most High came to him, saying, this one shall not be your heir, but one will come from your own body shall be your heir. And again, I think last week I said it was Lot. I got confused. No, he's talking about one of the slaves, servants that were in his household. And we're going to see why he tells him that, right? What we read in chapter 15. Because he basically says, so what? One of my heirs is, I guess, is going to inherit it because I ain't got no baby. There ain't no child present, right? And we're going to break that down. So we also have 46 verse 2 Genesis. Then the Most High spoke to Israel in the visions of the night and said, Jacob, Jacob. And he said, here I am. Why am I connecting that with Jacob? Because there's a connection with him appearing to them in the vision of the night. It's the same way he appears to Abram, right? 1 Samuel 15:10. Now the word of the Most High came to Samuel saying, and I'm connecting this to show you that the one that was coming to them in visions from the very beginning was Messiah, was Mashiach, right? The word, we see it clearly in the Targums, the word, right? Daniel 10:1, and also verse 12. In the third year of Cyrus, king of Persia, a message was revealed to Daniel, whose name was called Belteshazzar. The message was true, but the appointed time was long. And he understood the message and had understanding of the vision. Then he said to me, do not fear, Daniel, for from the first day that you set your heart to understand and to humble yourself before the Adon, Your words were heard, and I have come because of your word. So that's just confirming another incident of him saying, do not fear, right? He would always come to the righteous men and women and saying, do not fear the word, right? Genesis 21:17. And just before I even read Genesis 21, a reminder that when the word of the Most High descended on Mount Sinai in the times of the Israelites in the wilderness with Moses, they feared greatly and asked Moses to go, to go ahead on their behalf because they feared. So that only goes to show you that there is like this fear that comes upon you when the word speaks, right? When the word descends, is fire. So Genesis 21:17. And the Most High heard the voice of the lad. Then the angel of the Most High called to Hagar out of heaven and said to her, what ails you, Hagar? Fear not, for the Most High has heard the voice of the lad where he is. And we're going to obviously get to that point eventually in our study in Genesis, but this is later on when Ishmael is born and later kicked out of the Abraham's household. But again, we see a representative of the Most High as an angel. Could have been Messiah, maybe. But an angel came to Hagar and told her the same thing, fear not, right? Genesis 26:24. And the Adon appeared to him the same night and said, I am the Elohim of your father Abraham. Do not fear, for I am Haya with you. I will bless you and multiply your descendants for my servant Abraham's sake. And I believe this is when he appears to either Isaac or Jacob. I think it was Jacob. Maybe Isaac, I'm not sure. But anyway, he appears to him and says the same exact thing. Do not fear, for I am with you, right? Isaiah 41:10. Fear not, for I am with you. Be not dismayed, for I am your Elohim. I will strengthen you. Yes, I will help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand. And oh man, I have such a beautiful memory with the Most High speaking to me through this Bible verse. Oh, it's so beautiful. But yes, there's always that promise that He gives us. Fear not. We're in this world where the kings of the kingdoms of this world can come and attack us, right? There could be a war tomorrow for all we know. There could be something taking place, some prophecies manifested that they're already pre-written for us, right? Pre-stated for us in the timeline of heaven. However, he's always reminding his people, fear not. Fear not, for I am with you, right? Deuteronomy 33:29. Happy are you, O Israel, who is like you, a people saved by the Adon, the shield of your help and the sword of your majesty. Your enemies shall submit to you, and you shall tread down their high places. And again, who is Israel? Israel is not a place. It is a people in covenant. It is his people in covenant, in the same covenant that Abram enters here in chapter 15. Remember, Abram is the father of Israel. So Abram begins his covenant. So when you speak of Israel, you're speaking of Abraham's seed, right? His righteous seed. So once again, happy are you, O Israel, O bride, right? O church. Who is like you, a people saved by the Most High? And it's not that they are saved because they have a bloodline and they decided to operate under the state of Israel. No, it's a people saved by the word, by Messiah. We're going to connect that full circle at the end. Psalms 3:3. But you, O Adon, are a shield for me, my glory, and the one who lifts up my head. Psalms 84:11. For the Adon Elohim is a sun and shield. The Adon will give grace and glory. No good thing will he withhold from those who walk uprightly. And once again, his church is those who walk uprightly in righteousness, right? Psalms 91:4. He shall cover you with his feathers. I love Psalms 91, by the way. And under his wings you shall take refuge. His truth shall be your shield and buckler. Always remember that. Fear not. Yasharab. Numbers 18:20. Then the Adon said to Aaron, you shall have no inheritance in the land, nor shall you have any portion among them. I am your portion and your inheritance among the children of Israel. And so remember, Aaron is a Levite, is a priest, right? The head of the priesthood in the wilderness. However, we know that we are to become the royal priesthood. And so, as his priesthood, we have no inheritance. He is our inheritance. The same exact promise that he gives Abram on chapter 15. I am your reward, right? I am. So, yes, Psalms 58:11, so that men will say, surely there is a reward for the righteous. Surely he is the Most High who judges in the earth. So once again, he is our reward, the reward of the righteous. It's him. The what is the end goal of our walk of this narrow path in this life is to make it to him, to live with him forever in eternity. Proverbs 11 verse 10, when it goes well with the righteous, the city rejoices, and when the wicked perish, there is jubilation. So once again, when it goes well with the righteous, that is the reward that he has for his righteous. And I believe the city is more prophetically speaking about the New Jerusalem. So connecting now with verse 2, we have, I do want to read also from the Targums where it says, but Abram said, the Adon, what will you give me? Well, Abram said to the Adon, Adon, what will you give me, seeing I go childless? And the heir of my house is Eleazar of Damascus. So he's questioning him, like, so you gave me this promise, right? That you'll multiply my seed, but I got no child. So who is my seed? So he's not doubting the Most High, but he's questioning, like, okay, so clearly I don't got a baby. So will it be one of them, right? So he has a valid point. So now let's see what the Targum says. It says, verse 2 here, and Abram said to the Most High, great blessings hast thou given me, and great are they which it is before thee to give me. Nevertheless, what profit is to me when I pass from the world without children? And Eleazar, the manager, the son of sustenance, of my house, by whose hands signs were brought for, or to me and Damascus expects to be my heir. So in other words, he is, it's basically the same thing that we just read in the canon, but here we see a little bit more detail because he tells him, what profit is it to me when I pass from the world without children? In other words, like, when I move on to eternity, like, I didn't leave an inheritance like through my bloodline. So then is this guy my heir? So that's what's basically he's asking the Most High, right? Which is very valid. And so connecting with that, we have Genesis once again, Genesis 17:18. And Abraham said to the Most High, oh, that Ishmael might live before you. And once again, he is assuming Ishmael later on is the seed of promise, right? In Acts 7:5, we see in the account of Stephen, him retelling the story, and the Most High gave him no inheritance in it, not even enough to set his foot on. But even when Abraham had no child, he promised to give it to him for a possession and to his descendants after him. So this is again the recount of Stephen confirming this matter. And now connecting with verse 3, and Abram said, look, you have given me no offspring. Indeed, one born in my house is my heir. We see that again. We read it last week in chapter 14. Now, when Abram heard that his brother was taken captive, he armed his 318 trained servants who were born in his own house and went in pursuit as far as Dan. And there's obviously when, Lot was taken captive, but that we spoke about it last week as well. It's just to prove and show that those servants that were born within his household, he saw as part of basically his family, right? Which is why he brings up this guy that was from Damascus. Like, so is it him, the heir? So moving along, we have verse 4. And behold, the word of the Most High came to him, saying, this one shall not be your heir, but one who will come from your own body shall be your heir. So connecting with that, we have 2 Samuel chapter 7, verse 12. When your days are fulfilled and you rest with your fathers, I will set up your seed after you, who will come from your own body, and I will establish his kingdom. And this is a promise to David. But notice the language is the same. He is promising from his own seed, basically from his own bloodline, there will be a king that will be born, and be raised for the future kingdom, which we know was Messiah's kingdom. Galatians 4:28, Paul states, "Now we, brethren, as Isaac was, are children of promise." I'm getting ahead of myself because Isaac is not in the picture yet as of now, but we know that Isaac was later the son of the promise, the same promise that the Most High here is giving Abram. We know that the promise comes through Isaac, meaning the son that Sarai later borns, births, right? And so, as Isaac was, so are we, right? So that is important to keep in mind because that only shows you that the promise was of faith. It had nothing to do with bloodline. And why do I say that? I'm going to say it off the bat. We see later that because of Sarah, Abraham ends up sleeping with his, with her servant, which was Hagar, and she becomes his concubine, right? Basically, he makes her his wife as well, and he has Ishmael. But we know that the son of promise comes through faith. Ishmael came through the flesh because he did not believe. He went ahead and took things on his own matter, things of the flesh, which is why in Galatians, and if you were with me and we did the study of Galatians, we break this down. Paul breaks this down beautifully. There is a son of the promise, Isaac, son of faith, and a son of the flesh, the son of the bondservant woman, which is from slavery, a son of the flesh. He wasn't born of faith, but of the flesh because he acted upon doubt. Okay? And that is a distinction there that I need you guys to understand off the bat. I'm telling you, if you understand, if you can end tonight's study understanding chapter 15, the rest of scriptures will make sense. I promise you. I promise you this. So moving along, verse 5, where it says, "Then he brought him outside and said, Look now toward heaven and count the stars if you are able to number them. And he said to him, So shall your descendants be." I know we spoke about this last time when we did the chapter 12, but how beautiful it is that the stars of heavens represent angels, mighty ones, right? Represent basically little gods, to call them that, right? Not the most high, but they are gods. In eternity, we were angels already, like when he talks through Jeremiah, "Before I placed you in your mother's womb, I knew you." He's talking in eternity. Our minds, our carnal minds cannot comprehend eternity. It's very hard to grasp the concept that we existed before we came to this life, right? But it's almost like one third fell from heaven. Could it be us? Could it be one third that doubted and we're still like deciding, which is why we have free will? This is just me speaking. I don't want you saying, a whole doctrine was formed from chapter 15, but it makes sense because the promise is about the stars in the heavens, right? So shall your descendants be. The descendants have nothing to do with earthly bloodline. It's spiritual. It's faith. It's grafting back into the tree of life, the fruit of the tree of life. I don't know if you're connecting that. The tree of life. Who was the one who created us, if not Mashiach himself? Does that make sense? Are you guys following me with this? I know it could be deep, but it's the same concept with the sand. We came from dust, So there's so many connections there. But let's connect some Bible verses here with verse 5. We have a few, including Enoch. So we have Genesis 22, verse 17. "Blessing I will bless you." And this is again the same promise he gave Abraham. He later gives to Jacob, and to Isaac, and he also gives to Jacob, right? So, "Blessing I will bless you, and multiplying I will multiply your descendants as the stars of the heaven, and as the sand which is on the seashore. And your descendants shall possess the gate of their enemies," which goes beautifully with what I was just trying to say, right? Deuteronomy 1:10, "The Adon, your Elohim, has multiplied you, and here you are today as the stars of heaven in multitude." And this is the fulfillment of that the Israelites multiplied in the wilderness, right? here in this life. So Psalms 147, verse 4, he counts the number of the stars. He calls them by name. I want to stop a little bit here. I like this one because that kind of confirms my theory that I was telling you. He knows us by name. And at the same time, he says that he calls the stars by name. Do you understand where I'm coming?
Yeah. That could.
He counts the number of the stars and he calls them by name. They are people.
Yes.
They are us.
Descendants.
Who is the one? Yes, who is the ones that he names? He's going to give us a new name clearly from the one we have now because he already named us in eternity.
This could be
Amazing.
far-fetched, but I was gonna say that some of the luminaries are even formed as people.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. There's so many connection with the. It's just deep, guys. It's very deep. Jeremiah 33:22. As the host of heaven cannot be numbered, nor the sand of the sea measured, so will I multiply the descendants of David, my servant, and the Levites who minister to me. Obviously, this is a prophecy, a latter day prophecy that the Most High is speaking through Jeremiah, understanding that David, his servant, is Messiah, right? And the Levites who minister to him is not the literal Levites in the times of the wilderness, because we know that Messiah no longer operates under the Levitical priesthood. But he's talking about the priesthood who minister to him. It is us, right? David, his servant, is Messiah. And then we are the Levites, the priests that minister to him. And so, again, as the hosts of heaven cannot be numbered, nor the sand of the sea measured, so will I multiply the descendants of Mashiach. I don't know if y'all following. It's the same exact storyline. Let me see. Someone is saying something. Yes, how beautiful, stars full of light. Yes, sister. That's another thing. Yes, because we were beings created in light. We are supposed to be carriers of it. His light, not our light, right?
Let your light
So,
shine.
yes, let your light, yes, shine before men.
They would see your good deeds.
Yes. Oh my gosh, I love that connection from Matthew. Exodus 32:13, I mean. Remember Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, which is Jacob. By the way, Israel is Jacob, your servants, to whom you swore by your own self and said to them, I will multiply your descendants as the stars of the heaven, and all this land that I have spoken of I give to your descendants, and they shall inherit it forever. And I bring this one. This is Moses later on speaking, but understanding that Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, meaning Israel, it completes the 2 to 3 witnesses. The covenant that he establishes with Abraham, he confirms it twice through Isaac and Jacob, right? And so we just read here in chapter 15 that he enters this covenant at the when Abraham is sleeping at the night of during the night. He has this vision. We're gonna break that down later, what took place during this vision, right? Romans 4 verse 18, who contrary to hope in hope believed, so that he became, and this is speaking Paul speaking of Abraham, right? So that he became the father of many nations, according to what was spoken, so shall your descendants be. And again, the father of many nations, not only one nation, of many nations, because it's spiritual seed, right? It's not one bloodline. Hebrews 11:12. Therefore, from one man and him as a and him as good as dead were born as many as the star of the sky in multitude, innumerable as the sand which is by the seashore. Once again, confirming this. And by the way, this is connecting already. Let me see. No, just kidding. Did I read Genesis 17 already? No. Okay, let's continue. Yes, this is still connecting the same Bible verse, verse 5. Genesis 17:19. Then the Most High said, no, Sarah your wife shall bear you a son, and you shall call his name Isaac. I will establish my covenant with him for an everlasting covenant and with his descendants after him. This is later on after Ishmael, right? He's like, nope, nope, sir, that wasn't the promise through faith. This is the promise through faith, right? So we'll get to that, but that's just getting ahead of ourselves. Genesis 16:10. Then the angel of the Most High said to her, I will multiply your descendants exceedingly, so that they shall not be counted for multitude. I believe this is the part where he speaks to Hagar as well. Okay. And we're going to talk about that later because he gives Hagar a promise as well that he will multiply her descendants and they shall be counted for multitude. Okay. First Kings, well, before I get to First Kings, I want to read from Enoch, chapter 33, verse 3. Enoch chapter 33, verse 3. Yes. There we have it. I'll read 3 and 4, I guess. And I saw how, and by the way, this is Enoch way before Abraham ever even existed, right? And I saw how the stars of heaven come forth. Remember the connection with stars that I gave you? And I counted the portals out of which they proceed and wrote down all their outlets of each individual star by itself, according to their number and their names, their courses and their positions and their times and their months, as Uriel, the holy angel who was with me, showed me. He showed all things to me and wrote them down for me. Also their names he wrote for me, and their laws and their companies. So I know this obviously speaking of the constellations, but it's the same language that I want you guys to see. It's there from the beginning. He named the stars by name, right? So yes. So we have also First King 3:8 connecting with verse 5. And your servant is in the midst of your people, whom you have chosen, a great people, too numerous to be numbered or counted. This was already in the times of Solomon. So the people were, again, even here in the timeline of King Solomon was already being fulfilled. They were multiplying, right? As well as we see it in Deuteronomy 28:62. Deuteronomy 28 is the part where he speaks about the blessings and the curses, right? Look what it says here. You shall be left few in number. This is if you disobey his commandments, by the way. You shall be left few in number, whereas you were as the stars of heaven in multitude. I'm going to break that down to you because you would not obey the voice of the Most High, your Elohim. I'm going to read it again slowly. I always say to my children, when you read something you didn't get it, go back and read it slowly. In other words, if you don't obey, right, you shall be left few in number, whereas you were, right? You were as the stars of heaven in multitude. Do you guys see what I see? Okay. In other words, if you don't obey, you won't make it to the heavens, to the heavenly tablets, and be part of the stars, joining back the family that was from the beginning. I don't know if y'all see it. I don't know if y'all see it. To restore. We're going to see the full circle at the end. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. We also have Nehemiah, a fulfillment we see in Nehemiah in the times of the house of Judah returning back to Jerusalem. Nehemiah 9:23, you also multiplied their children as the stars of the heaven and brought them into the land which you had told their fathers to go in and possess. Galatians 3:16, now to Abraham and his seed were the promises made. Again, this is Paul. He does not say and to seeds in plural, right? As of many, but as of one, and your seed who is Messiah. And again, I'm going to break this down further with the slides so you understand what Paul exactly is saying, okay? In other words, it's not plurality in that one seed because it goes back full circle to Messiah. The seed of the promise through Isaac goes all the way to Messiah, right? And then through Messiah comes the promise fulfilled that was made to Hagar and Ishmael. I don't know if you guys are getting it. In other words, the nations are restored through Messiah, through the one seed, through Isaac, right? But it goes full circle. It is through Messiah that we're grafted in into the cultivated olive tree, the tree of life, right? So through one seed is the promise fulfilled. It's not through Ishmael because Ishmael needs to be grafted in, which is why there is the promise. I don't know if y'all seeing it. All right. I get a little excited. So let's continue. Verse 6. And he believed, we're going to break this down. And he believed the Adon, and he accounted it to him for righteousness. We later see Paul quoting exactly this in Romans. Let's connect it. Genesis 21, verse 1. And the Most High visited Sarah, and he had said, and the Adon did for Sarah as he had spoken. In other words, Abraham believed this, right? So because he believed this, it took place through Sarah, right? Romans 4, 3, 9, and 22. You guys can read the full chapter, but I'm just grabbing 3 verses. For what does the scriptures say? Abraham believed the Most High, and it was accounted to him for righteousness. Verse 9. Does this blessedness then come upon the circumcised only, or upon the uncircumcised also? For we say that faith was accounted to Abraham for righteousness. I'm going to take a little break here. The circumcised in the times of Paul, in the times of Messiah, in those days, the circumcised were only the Jews, right? The uncircumcised were the rest of the nations, all the Gentiles, right? So Paul is making a clear connection here. He said, Abraham believed, remember the seed through faith, which was the seed through Sarah, Isaac, right? Abraham believed the Most High, and it was accounted to him for righteousness. Now, Paul says, does this blessedness then come upon the circumcised only, or upon the uncircumcised also? For we say that faith was accounted to Abraham for righteousness, verse 22, and therefore it was accounted to him for righteousness. Understanding that when this promise was made and it was accounted to Abraham for righteousness, Abraham was not yet circumcised. I don't know if you guys are following me. He was not yet circumcised, nor were his children. So the promise came through faith. Circumcision came as a result of an outwardly obedience to that promise of covenant. The promise has nothing to do with bloodline. In other words, I don't know if you guys are, and if you guys don't quite get it yet, it's okay. It takes time to read the scriptures and read it again and read it again. And then you go to Galatians and you break that down and you're like, I get it now. I get what Paul was trying to say, right? Speaking of Galatians, Galatians 3, verse 6, just as Abraham believed the Most High and it was accounted to him for righteousness. We see Paul quoting it again. And in James, we see James as well quoting him. And the scripture was fulfilled, which says, Abraham believed the Most High and it was accounted to him for righteousness. And he was called the friend of the Most High. Yes, Yasmin.
How it's crazy that you say that because in Genesis 12 we were actually reading how like the Most High spoke to him like get out of your country, like get away from your family, and that shows that he was not like
attached.
Yes, he was also like grafted in.
Oh, yes, he crossed over. He literally left the world, the nations, like the things of the world. He was still clearly in the world, but you know what I mean? Spiritually speaking, he crossed over. He came out of her, my people, like in Revelation, right? And because of that, and so a lot of times people will say he believed and it was accounted to him for righteousness, it's faith. Yes, not understanding that the belief is what led him to obey. Yeah. If you don't believe, you don't obey. Point blank. And I've always said it. If somebody tells you to do something, you only do it if you believe what that person said. Yeah. If not, you're just doing a religion. You're just following works with that works. Yes. Works. That's why you need both faith plus works, because works without the faith is dead, just the same way that faith without works is dead. Right? It goes together, as James states. So Abraham believed, but because he believed wholeheartedly in his heart, he did. He obeyed, right? He came out of her, like of the nations, right? And he continued to walk in righteousness. And we'll see it. We'll see his life. Yes.
I want to share the scripture that says many are called, but few are chosen, and it just goes to show that very few will answer that call.
Come on now. Thank you for that.
Also,
Amen.
it's
Yes.
like faith also needs work. Like, and
Yes.
it's like that's how you're that's like kind of like the what's the word? Like the
Like it proves your faith.
yes, there you go.
James even says it, and that same
Yeah.
Bible verse that we're quoting, James even said it like, show me your faith by your works. Like, in other words, like I'll show you my faith by my works.
Mm.
Like, I'm gonna show you what I believe by what I do.
That's
Cause like, you know what I mean? Like if I don't do, then what the heck am I preaching? I'm gonna show you my faith through my works, right? It's not that you're saved by your works, but if you are saved, your works will prove that you are saved. I don't know if that makes sense, but
that's
yes.
why it says let your light shine before others. So like
Thank
they will
you.
see your good deeds. And in other words, if you're not doing the deeds, no one will know.
Absolutely. And that ties in beautifully with what you just quoted before. Yes. Sylvie had said, and I want to share really quick. She had shared before. I just noticed your text. I'm going to read it now. I know this is off topic, but you know nothing new under the sun. Absolutely. Do you know there's a store that sells the stars? Supposedly they find you in heaven. Oh, interesting. Interesting. Your star. Supposedly they find you in heaven. Interesting. And then Eileen is saying faith without action is dead. Absolutely. 100%. 100%. Thank you guys. Keep sharing. Come on. Let's do this. Psalms 32 verse 2. Blessed is the man to whom the Most High has not imputed iniquity and in whose spirit there is no deceit. And why do I say this? Because we just read that Abraham believed and it was counted to him as righteousness. What is the opposite of righteousness? Iniquity, which is iniquity is lawlessness. It's one and the same. When you look into the root word, it's the same thing. So, in other words, blessed is the man to whom the Adon does not impute iniquity. In other words, and in whose spirit there is no deceit. In other words, if you are righteous, it's because you are obeying his commandments. You are not lawless, right? And so he was counted righteous for his faith, but clearly he was obeying also. Psalms 106, verse 31. And that was accounted to him for righteousness to all generations forevermore. So we see that same Bible verse being quoted again and again and again by Paul, by James, by David, I believe was here in this psalm specifically, right? And we also have Nehemiah, in the times of Nehemiah, once again, chapter 9, verse 8. You found his heart faithful before you and made a covenant with him to give the land of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Jebusites, and the Girgashites, to give it to his descendants. You have performed your words, for you are righteous. And that's, once again, I believe that was Ezra the priest, when he was already telling the people they had re-entered into this covenant. They had just repented after being in slavery, and come back to the land of Jerusalem, right? He's reminding them about the covenant that he had done with Abraham, right? And once again, we also have Isaiah 40, verse 26. Lift up your eyes on high and see who has created these things, who brings out their host by number. He calls them all by name. By the greatness of his might and the strength of his power, not one is missing. And this is a prophecy found in Isaiah, once again speaking about the constellations, the stars. Who are the stars? You know what that always, it's so funny. I tell my little one, I always tell Katie, like, when I sing this song, I know it's like a worldly song, like it's a lullaby, but I literally think of this, like twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you are. You know? Yes. Yes. How I wonder what you are. So yes, when you look up the heavens, go and wonder. May we never lose our wonder, right?
Yes.
May we be like children. So Genesis, okay, no. So that was connecting with verse 6. So connecting with verse 7, where he says, Then he said to him, I am the Adon who brought you out of the Ur of the Chaldeans to give you this land to inherit it. So once again, he confirms he's the word, right? And he connecting with that, we have Genesis 12:1. Now the Adon had said to Abram, Get out of your country, from your family, and from your father's house to a land that I will show you. We see that he tells him that back in chapter 12, right? And now in chapter 15, he confirms once again, I am he, the one who told you to come out of her, my people. So he's confirming once again, I am, right? Hiya. Oh, he's always confirming who he is. Genesis 11, 28 and verse 31. And Haran died before his father Terah in his native land in Ur of the Chaldeans. And Terah took his son Abram and his grandson Lot, the son of Haran, and his daughter-in-law Sarai, his son Abram's wife, and they went out with them from Ur of the Chaldeans to go to the land of Canaan. And they came to Haran and dwelt there. This is just confirming that he indeed left the land of the Chaldeans as the Most High had told him, right? Because that's where they were. Genesis 13, verses 15 and 17, we studied a couple weeks ago. For all the land which you see, I give to you and your descendants forever. Arise, walk in the land through its length and its width, for I give it to you. And once again, this is recapping the chapter that Yasmin taught, and a reminder that Abraham chose the land not by what he saw, but by faith. Lot chose of what by what was pleasing to his eyes, right? So went after flesh. Abraham went after faith, right? We also have Psalms 105, 42, and 44. For he remembered his holy promise, and Abraham, his servant, meaning the Most High, remembered his promise to Abraham, right? He gave them the lands of the Gentiles, and they inherited the labor of the nations. So once again, you're recounting what took place in the times of Abraham. So now verse 8, and I think I'm going to just do this last one before I go to the slides, just to recap a little bit. So verse 8, and he said, actually, let me see. Yeah, I'll do 8 and then we'll take a break. And he said, the Adon, how shall I know what I will inherit? So I do want to read from the Targums this verse. So it's verse 8 in the Targums. Because there, it sounds like he's asking, like, so how do I know, right? In the Targums it says, and he said, Adon, by what may I know that I shall be the heir of it? So it reads a little different, and I feel like it brings more clarity. So it's not that he was doubting the Most High. It's almost like asking him, like, so like how am I, like, give me a sign, like, for me to know, like, how I'm gonna be the heir of it, right? So in other words, that's what I get from it. And then connecting with that, we have Genesis 24, verses 13 through 14. Behold, here I stand by the well of water, and the daughters of the men of the city are coming out to draw water. By the way, giving a little bit of context of this is the times where they were looking for a wife for Isaac, right? And so one of his servants basically asks the Most High for a sign. We see it. Now, let it be that the young woman to whom I say, please let down your pitcher that I may drink. And she says, drink, and I will also give your camels a drink. Let her be the one you have appointed for your servant Isaac. He's asking this to the Most High, by the way. And by this I will know that you have shown kindness to my master. So in other words, we see in scriptures, it's okay to ask him for a sign. Okay? It doesn't mean that we don't have faith. It's almost like confirming, like, so please, just to be clear, can you like give me a little sign? And that's what the servant, Abraham's servant asks up to the Most High. Like, let it be when she does is that this is the one that you're appointing for Isaac as a wife, right? We also see Gideon, but by the way, giving a little bit of context with Gideon in the times of the judges, Gideon was a righteous judge. However, we do see that he almost like tempts the Most High with the signs, because he not only does he give him an answer, but he's like, but give me another sign, but give me another sign, like triple confirm. Right, I don't know if you remember that, but yeah, Gideon was like, show me, show me, show me, right? I feel a lot of us are like Gideon, because I know I'd be like Gideon a lot of times. I ain't even gonna lie. I'd be like, so just to be clear, make sure that was you though. Can you give me like another sign on top of that sign? All right, so Judges 6, let's read it, 36 through 40. So Gideon said to the Most High, if you will save Israel by my hand, as you have said, look, I shall put a fleece of wool on the threshing floor. If there is dew on the fleece only, and it is dry on all the ground, then I shall know that you will save Israel by my hand, as you have said. Verse 38. And it was so. When he rose early the next morning and squeezed the fleece together, he wrung the dew out of the fleece, a bowl full of water. Then Gideon said to the Most High, do not be angry with me. That sounds like us, right? Like, so do not be angry with me, but let me speak just once more. In other words, give me another sign, because that was clear, but let me just make sure, right? And then he says, let me test, I pray, just once more with the fleece. Let it now be dry only on the fleece. So he goes backwards now, right? But on all the ground, let there be dew. And verse 40, we see, and the Most High did so that night. It was dry on the fleece only, but there was dew on all the ground. And if you continue reading, you see that he continues like, all right, cool. Now give me another sign, right? Like, so, but just so you know, in scriptures we see is totally okay. And we're going to confirm this in Isaiah in a little bit. So 1 Samuel 14, 9, 10, it says, if they say thus to us, wait until we come to you, then we will stand still in our place and not go up to them. But if they say thus, come up to us, then we will go up. For the Adon has delivered them into our hand, and this will be a sign for us. So once again, we see even in the times of David, in the times of Saul and his son, what was his son's name? Jonathan. We see them like moving by signs that the Most High gives, like, to see if it was okay for them to go into war, or if they were going to win the war type of thing. We also see, but in this case, I'm going to give an example in Zechariah, where I believe this was more like because he doubted, right? So in the account of Luke, we see Zechariah, right? An angel comes to him. By the way, Zechariah is the father of John the Baptist. Just to give you a little bit of context, his wife Elizabeth was sterile. Like she could not conceive, right? And so an angel, the same way that the angel comes to Mary to give the good news that she would bear a son, also comes to Zechariah, to Elizabeth, and also to Zechariah to let him know that Elizabeth is gonna, have this prophet of the Most High who will make a way for the Messiah and all these things. But we see Zechariah actually, not only does he ask, like he's asking for a sign, but it's almost like I believe he doubted that this could happen because of the fact of what happened as a result. He was muted. If you read the full story, he was muted as a result until John the Baptist was born. He was not able to speak. So it reads like this. And Zechariah said to the angel, how shall I know this? For I am an old man, and my wife is well advanced in years. So you see the difference there? Like, in other words, he's not really asking for a sign. He's saying, like, are you saying the truth? That's kind of like how I read that, like, because I'm really old and so is my wife. Like, how is that gonna be? So there's a difference with asking for a sign and actually not believing the Most High. I don't know if you guys follow me. And again, we see that a sign is completely okay to ask because we see that took place in Isaiah. Look what with King Ahaz, I think it's pronounced. So Isaiah 7:10 through 14. Moreover, the Most High spoke again to Ahaz. Yes, Ahaz is right there. Asking, ask a sign for yourself. Look, the Most High telling Ahaz to ask for a sign. Look, ask a sign for yourself from the Most High your Elohim. Ask it either in the depth of the height above. But Ahaz said, I will not ask, nor will I test the Most High. You see the difference? Like he's telling him, ask for a sign. He's like, no, I'm not going to test you. So look what happens. Verse 13. Then he said, hear now, O house of David, is it a small thing for you to weary men, but will you weary my Elohim also? Therefore, the Adon himself will give you a sign. In other words, you didn't want the sign, he will give you a sign. And he says, behold, and the sign is in the heavens, by the way, through the constellations. The virgin shall conceive and bear a son and shall call his name Emmanuel. So the sign that he speaks of here is actually the sign in the heavens that took place, showing that there was the virgin, like the constellation of the virgin, had a son, and it was the son, the little son in her belly. So, but yes, anyway, speaking of signs, it's okay. He shows us signs in the heavens. Speaking of constellations, he shows us signs in the heavens all the time. As a matter of fact, he speaks to us. It's just we don't have knowledge of of these signs, right? But we just had a sign last night, a blood moon, you know?
Yes.
They are signs, a sign of judgment.
Yes.
A lot of things happening right now, people, but remember what I said at the beginning, fear not, for I am with you.
Stuff is cooking.
Genesis 15:17. Where am I here? I'm connecting still verse 8. So verse 8, we have actually no, I connected everything with verse 8. Let me just check the chat really quick. Sylvie's actually saying, be careful what you ask for a sign because believe me, he will answer you.
Yes.
That is true. Crazy. The other day, I was like, I need a sign, and my phone flashed definitely the most sign. Oh my gosh, I love it. You know what's crazy? One time, and I kid you not, he knows he is my witness. One time I was driving, right? And I remember that Bible verse in Isaiah where he said, ask for a sign and I will give you a sign. And I remember I was driving. It was something that he had put in my heart at that time in my life to speak to someone from the church I was currently in, to speak about the things that he was revealing to me about, the revelations in the scriptures that I was seeing, that I was like, it's not being taught in church, but I was afraid to speak up on that matter, right? And so I was like, do you really want me to speak about this? Like, is it you? I don't want it to come from my flesh for it to sound like prideful. Long story short, I was very nervous about speaking up. And so I asked the Most High, as I'm driving to a photo session, I'll never forget. I was like headed on the highway, the 874, I think 878, the one that lands you on US 1. And I'll never forget, I remember as if it was yesterday, it was sunny. The day was like not one single cloud. You know, like when the sky is really blue and very sunny, whatever, I dared to ask him for a sign. I'm like, if this is truly you that is telling me to speak these things to these people, give me a sign in the heavens. Like, show me that this is you that wants me to do this. And now, oof, I get goosebumps just remembering, I kid you not. Like thunder in the middle, like, drrr, like lightning, like, drrr. I was like,
Oh my God.
and mind you, there was no clouds. Because doubters will be like, oh, obviously, like you live in Miami, like, oh, the weather's bipolar. No. And it did not rain. It wasn't like a cloudy day. It was just a sunny, regular day. Okay. I knew for a fact that was him. So yes, thank you, Sylvie. When you ask for a sign, if it's truly him, he will confirm it. And how many times I have so many stories. I have testimonies after testimonies, guys. How many stories do I have that I've asked him for things, not necessarily like a sign per se, but asked him to speak to him, and he'll speak to me through Instagram. He'll speak to me through the tag, the car tag of a vehicle. Like he'll speak to me through a sign, like the signs on the highway that you see, like boogers coming up, because it's him. There's no other way. Like he just speaks through whoever, and he is that type of Elohim. So I love him for that. But anyway, let's continue. So now I'm going to share my slides really quick just to give a little summary of everything we've been speaking about. So once again, I'm going to go through this quickly. Going back to verse 1, do not fear, Abram. Remember what I told you guys. That's the theme that he starts it with, do not fear. So after battle, after rescue, after refusing the king of Sodom's riches, remember that, the word of the Most High comes and says, do not fear, Abram. I am your shield, your exceedingly great reward. Whew! This is the first time we read the word of the Most High came. So we know it was Messiah, right? The Adon speaks in the night, like he did to Jacob in Genesis 46:2, like he did to Samuel. We've read it in 1 Samuel 15:10, and like he did to Daniel, as we read in Daniel 10. So once again, Abram just walked away from visible wealth. We saw that in chapter 14 last week, right? So the Adon says, I myself am your reward. And it's so crazy to me how he is a literal thing that he tells the Levites. You shall have no share. It's so prophetic, guys. Everything is so foreshadowing. You shall have no part in the land, no inheritance in the land, because I am your reward. In other words, it's the same promise to us, right? So not land, not possessions, not recognition, but him, right? Psalms 84:11, we saw that he says he is a sun and a shield. Psalms 3:3 says he is our shield and glory. Numbers 18:20 says, I am your portion, right? I am your portion, which is what he tells the Levites. The covenant begins with reassurance. Fear is answered by his presence, right? And so Abram's honest question, we later see moving on. Abram responds honestly, like, what will you give me seeing I go childless, right? Like, okay, cool. Like, I'm going to inherit all these things, but, you know. So the promise of Genesis 12 still has no son attached to it. In Acts 7:5, the account by Stephen reminds us Abram did not even own land yet. That's another thing, right? He was just going from place to place by faith, right? Everything was a promise. Nothing was visible to him, nothing at all. So his heir at this moment, he thought maybe a servant born in his house, right? Abram isn't doubting, and I want to make this clear because clearly it wouldn't have been accounted to him as righteousness if it was doubt. He was not doubting the Most High's existence. He is wrestling with the delay. There is a difference, which is what happens to many of us. We believe him, but then we're like, so when is it going to happen though? Because, it's kind of like right now, what is the promise? That he will rescue us, that he will redeem us, that he will bring us out of this world and take us into this beautiful New Jerusalem. But again, it's delaying. It's not that we don't believe the promise. It's kind of like, but when? It's ghetto here. Yeah. Yo, like, but when? Give me a little sign. And he gives us the signs, which is in the heavens. He continuously gives us a sign. It is coming. So it connects with this chapter right now. Faith does not mean silence. It means bringing your questions to the Most High. So it doesn't mean that just because you have faith that you're not going to ask certain things, right? Different though than Zechariah, how we read in Luke, because his questions was more like, we're old. How's that going to happen? Right? It's different. It's not like we're saying like, so how is Messiah going to come? Because, I don't see how it's going to happen. That's different. It's more so like, all right, we know he's coming, but when? The question is when. It's not that we don't believe it. It's like, but when? You see the difference? All right. Cool. So again, he says on verse 4 that he will bring one from his own body, meaning from Abraham's bloodline, right? From his own genes, right? So the Most High responds clearly. And by the way, I put this graphic on purpose here with a tree, right? So the Most High responds clearly, one who will come from your own body shall be your heir. This narrows the promise. That is not Eliezer, it's not adoption, it is a son, right? So this connects forward. Like I said, like we read in 2 Samuel 7:12, David's seed from his body. Galatians 4:28, the children of promise. Remember I said that he said as of not seeds in plural, but one seed. Okay. In other words, the covenant always moves through the promised seed, which comes through Messiah, the tree of life. And once again, it has nothing to do with bloodline. It goes straight back. The seed of promise given to Abraham was the redemption that will come through his children, full circle with Messiah. Whoo! Yes, girl, dance it. So verse 5, look at the stars. Who are the stars? Twinkle, twinkle, right? Twinkle, twinkle. So then the Most High brings Abram. This is very small, by the way, but bear with me. The Most High brings Abram outside. Look now toward heaven and count the stars. Clearly, we know Abram cannot count the stars, right? Psalms 147:4 says, he counts the number of the stars. Abram cannot count them. Only the Creator can. And by the way, he knows them by name. Jeremiah 33:22 echoes this promise. Exodus 32:13 repeats it. Deuteronomy 1:10 says it was fulfilled in Moses' day. Nehemiah 9:23 says the people became numerous. So the stars represent countless descendants, order in chaos, and divine faithfulness during suffering. So Isaiah 40:26 later tells exiles to look at the stars, reminding them of this very promise. So even Solomon says in 1 Kings 3:8, the people are too many to be numbered. So in other words, the promise moves from future hope to national reality in those days, right? Yet, in Deuteronomy 28:62, it warns us that disobedience would reverse that abundance, that multiplication, right? So the promise of seed carries responsibility. In other words, obedience. And once again, Abram believed. Verse 6, This is the center of the character. And he believed the Most High and he counted it to him as righteousness. Abraham trusted. He had no child. He had no land. He had no timeline. No timeline. He just trusted, right? Romans 4:3 repeats this. Galatians 3:6 repeats this. James 2:23 calls him a friend of the Most High for believing, right? Psalms 32:2 speaks of righteousness counted. The language of counted is priestly, and I need you to understand this, like an acceptable offering. I don't know if you got that. Again, the language of counted is priestly. It's the same acceptable offering. So it was counted to him as righteousness, right? A priestly, because of the obedience, because of the the soothing aroma, no, what was it called? The fragrant aroma that raises to the heavens when there is sacrifice is the same exact thing. So Psalms 106:31 uses the same phrase for Phinehas. Later, Nehemiah 9:8 describes Abraham as faithful and obedient, reframing his trust as active loyalty. So in other words, Genesis shows that trust. The later texts describe the faithfulness. So faith is trust that produces obedience, in a nutshell. I'm basically going back to everything I've been saying to summarize it so that people can see the full picture. So the seed, many or one. That's what Galatians is speaking of, right? Genesis 15 clearly speaks of countless descendants, but Galatians 3:16 applies the word seed to one, meaning the Messiah. Genesis uses a singular collective noun, seed, meaning many come from that one seed, right? Paul draws attention to its singular form and points back to Messiah. It's a full circle, guys. This does not erase the national promise. It reveals its fulfillment. The many come through the one. The promise expands from biological descendants that came through Abraham, right, to those redeemed later in Messiah, back to the tree of life. Do you see it now? I don't know if y'all see it. Y'all see it? So the covenant of land, here we are. I am the Most High who brought you out of Ur of the Chaldeans, right? Just like I am the Most High who brought you out of Egypt. And just the same one that's asking us today to come out of her, right? So Abram asks, how shall I know? This is not rebellion. Others ask for confirmation as well. We saw Gideon, we saw Zechariah. Well, Zechariah doubted. That's different. But the Most High answers with covenant ceremony. And I put these images here once again, especially specifically this one down here, because the promise was that he would be the father of the many nations, right? And again, full circle through Messiah, not through his bloodline, but through the redemption. All right, so now we're going to go back to connecting verse 9. So he said to him, bring me a 3-year-old heifer, a 3-year-old, wait, not 9. I want to connect verse 10. Just kidding. Then he brought all these to him and cut them in two. This is the highlight of this chapter, by the way. And we're going to take not too long because I'm going to try to go through this really quickly, but this is very important. This is very important. You understand this. So then he brought all these to him and cut them in two, down the middle, and placed each piece opposite the other. But he did not cut the birds in two. I'm going to give you once again, he on verse 8 is asking, how do I know that I will inherit it, right? The promise. So we see on verse 9 that he tells him to bring him a 3-year-old heifer, right? A goat. Basically, there's a sacrifice. There's an altar taking place right here. Okay. You want to know how we're going to do this? Let's enter a covenant. That's basically what's happening here, right? He doesn't place the animals on an altar, but in verse 10, it says that he brought all these to him, the animals, okay? And he cuts them in two, like he slices them in two, right? Down the middle, and place each piece opposite the other. So imagine like a road, a path, right? There's the path, and on each side of that path, of each side of the road, there's animal pieces split in half, which I'm assuming the blood pouring out of the animal pieces, right? So understand that this is covenant language, okay? And I'm not going to take too long. I do recommend, if you want more depth, go into my study in Hebrews. I break this down more thoroughly because this all goes with trampling over the blood, right? That's spoken of in Hebrews later, right? But let's just focus on this part right now. So there's this pathway, and then there's this animals, blood, right? Okay. In verse 11, it says that, and well, let's break it by part. Let's just connect some precepts with verse 10 first. So we have Genesis 15:17, and it came to pass when the sun went down and it was dark that behold, there appeared a smoking oven and a burning torch that passed between those pieces. What reminds you of a smoking oven and a burning torch? Quickly. Fire. What reminds you? Who's fire? Who's like fire? Messiah.
Fire.
Yes. It says the word is a consuming fire. When he came, descended on Mount Sinai, it came down with smoke and fire. When he appeared to Moses, he came on the tree as consuming fire. The tree did not consume because he is the tree of life, right? Lit on fire. So who passed between those pieces? It was Messiah entering into the covenant. All right, I need you guys to understand that. Jeremiah, and I slow down because this is important, okay? Jeremiah 34:18, and I will give the man who have transgressed my covenant. What covenant? This covenant right here, right? Who have not performed the words of the covenant which they made before me when they cut the calf in two and passed between the parts of it. Leviticus 1:17. Then he shall split it at its wings, but shall not divide it completely. And the priest shall burn it on the altar, on the wood that is on the fire, is a burnt sacrifice, an offering made by fire, a sweet aroma to the Most High. And I include Leviticus just to show you that that was a practice that the Most High would ask them to do for atonement. However, this wasn't an atonement that he was doing in this case. On verse 10, this was a covenant, a blood covenant, right? Now, interestingly, we see something though. The only one that passed through the pieces was him, Messiah, right? And I'll show you in the slides later. But verse 11, where it says, and when the vultures came down on the carcasses, Abram drove them away. And I think it's very interesting, this one in the Targums, because here it speaks of the vultures, but in the Targums, it adds another understanding to that. And I kind of believe it. Let's see what it says. It says, and there came down, pay attention, idolatrous peoples which are like to unclean birds, to steal away the sacrifices of Israel. But the righteousness of Abraham was a shield over them. Do you see that? In the canon, it just reads, the vultures came down on the carcasses, meaning on the animal pieces that he laid out, right? And he drove them away. But the Targum says that they were idolatrous people who were considered like vultures, right? Like unclean birds. And they wanted to steal the sacrifices. Because those sacrifices were representing, in that case, Israel, the covenant that Abram was about to enter. So I was like, whoa, this one is deep, son. I wanted to read it just to give that context there. Verse 12, where it says, now when the sun was going down, a deep sleep fell upon Abram. And behold, horror and great darkness fell upon him. So this is very similar. I'm going to connect this verse with Genesis, like in the beginning, Genesis 2, verse 21. And the Adon caused a deep sleep to fall on Adam, and he slept. And he took one of his ribs and closed up the flesh in its place. So we see a deep sleep happen when the woman was created, taken out of his rib, right? We also see something similar with Jacob. So Genesis 28:11. So he came to a certain place and stayed there all night because the sun had set. Again, the sun setting, it's indicative of this happening. And he took one of the stones of that place and put it at his head, and he lay down in that place to sleep. And we know that that's when he then sees the angels coming through the Jacob's ladder, right? So once again, a vision. It's connected with the visions of the night. And so we see and just to read a little bit more, I had taken it out, but I left it there. Job 33:15, in a dream, in a vision of the night, when deep sleep falls upon men while slumbering on their beds. In other words, when we're in that state of like we're here but not really, I believe there is a state where we connect in the spiritual realm. I don't know if you guys have ever felt like you're falling asleep and you fall all of a sudden, like you are half awake, half asleep, and you feel like you fell.
Yeah.
I don't know. I get that all the time. And I also hear things and start seeing things. I believe there's a mystery there, which is why I believe the vision would come to Abraham, to Jacob, to other men in the nighttime, right? When they were about to fall asleep. So it's like a vision, but it's almost like this vision. It's like it's actually taking place. They're in the spirit realm. Which is why I believe that, behold, horror and great darkness fell upon him, upon Abram, right? Because he was able to see in the spirit realm. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah.
You were gonna say something, Yasmin?
I was gonna say that also when we're sleeping, I feel like that's the time that like we have no distractions. So when we sleep,
Yeah.
there's so much.
Yeah, and it's not just when you're asleep. There's a difference when you're completely asleep and when you're like in that you're not in that deep REM sleep, but it's in between. So you have enough to know you're here in
Yeah.
this realm, but you're also connected to the, I don't know how to explain it, but it's
Yeah,
very.
strange.
So, verse 13, where it says, then he said to Abram, know certainly that your descendants will be strangers in a land that is not theirs, and will serve them, and they will afflict them 400 years. And once again, this is why horror and great darkness fell upon Abram, because he was able to see, right? The promise. He was able to see when he's in this great vision, right? And so, connecting with that, we have Exodus 1:11, therefore they set taskmasters over them to afflict them with their burdens, and they built for Pharaoh supply cities, Pithom and Ramses. And again, I believe Abraham saw this in a vision. Acts 7:6, on the account of Stephen again, but the Most High spoke in this way, that his descendants would dwell in a foreign land, and that they would bring them into bondage and oppress them 400 years. Exodus 12:40. Now the sojourn of the children of Israel who lived in Egypt was 430 years. Exodus 2:22, and she bore him a son, and he, this is to Moses, by the way. She bore him a son, and he called his name Gershom, for he said, I have been a stranger in a foreign land. So this is connecting once again with that vision that he has, and then when the Most High tells him, your descendants will be stranger in a land that is not theirs, right? So connecting with verse 15, no, sorry, 14. And also the nation whom they serve, I will judge. Afterward, they shall come out with great possessions. And we see that that exactly happens in Exodus 6:6. Therefore, I say to the children of Israel, I am the Most High. I will bring you out from under the burdens of the Egyptians. I will rescue you from their bondage, and I will redeem you with an outstretched arm and with great judgments. And then we see they plundered the Egyptians on their way out on Exodus 12:36. And the Most High had given the people favor in the sight of the Egyptians, so that they granted them what they requested. Thus they plundered the Egyptians. So they took all their gold, all their money, all their woo, and they plundered them. So we see a fulfillment of this exactly same thing that the Most High had told Abram in this vision, that after they shall come out with great possessions. And I believe that's twofold too, because as we are leaving Egypt, spiritual Egypt, and into the New Jerusalem, we're plundering the Egyptians. Not with riches of this world, but spiritual ones, which are eternal. I don't know, I see it. Verse 15. Now as for you, you shall go to your fathers in peace. You shall be buried at a good old age. And I'm going to just read quickly through this, but just confirming in scriptures that this exactly took place with all of them. Genesis 25:8, then Abraham breathed his last and died in a good old age. Genesis 47:30, but let me lie with my fathers. You shall carry me out of Egypt and bury me in their burial place. And he said, I will do as you have said. And that was Joseph. I believe Exodus 12:41. And it came to pass at the end of the 430 years, on that same day, it came to pass that all armies of the Adam went out from the land of Egypt. So it happened. Genesis 48:22. Moreover, I have given to you one portion above your brothers, which I took from the hand of the Amorite with my sword and my bow. All these scriptures is just confirming everything that he basically foretold Abram, right, in this vision. Leviticus 18:24-28. Do not defile yourself with any of these things, for by all these the nations are defiled, which I am casting out before you. For the land is defiled, therefore I visit the punishment of its iniquity upon it, and the land vomits out its inhabitants. You shall therefore keep my statutes and my judgments, and shall not commit any of these abominations, either any of your own nation or any stranger who dwells among you. For all these abominations the men of the land have done who were before you, and thus the land is defiled. Lest the land vomit you also when you defile it, as it vomited out the nations that were before you. So that one goes straight to the point, confirming this. 1 Kings 21:26, and he behaved very abominably in following idols. This is speaking one of the kings, right? According to all that the Amorites had done, whom the Adon had cast out before the children of Israel. So we see everything was being fulfilled, bad and good. 1 Kings 11:12. Nevertheless, I will not to do I will not to do in your days for the sake of your father David. I will tear it out of your hand of your son. That was the promise that because of their disobedience, instead of coming upon David, it happened after Solomon, right? Yes. Actually, through Solomon's son is where the two kingdoms were actually split, and as a result, they ended up being sent in captivity and sent through all four corners of the earth. So the exact same prophecy and promise that was given here to Abraham. Matthew 23:32, fill up then the measure of your father's guilt. We see Messiah telling this to the Pharisees, by the way, confirming this. And we also see in the book of Maccabees, 2nd Maccabees 6:14, for in the case of the other nations, the Adon waits patiently to punish them until they have reached the full measure of their sins. But he does not deal in this way with us. And this is obviously, we know these are the righteous men and women in those days prior to Messiah. But basically, it's the same thing that was promised to Abraham. If you are righteous, that doesn't happen to you. But only if you are disobedient, the punishment of the nations will follow you. And lastly, Daniel 8:23, and in the latter time of their kingdom, when the transgressors have reached their fullness, a king shall arise, having fierce features, who understands sinister schemes. So all of this connecting with verse 16, once again, but in the fourth generation they shall return here, for the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet complete. And then connecting verse 17, and it came to pass when the sun went down and it was dark that behold, there appeared a smoking oven and burning torch that passed between the pieces. Once again, this was Messiah himself walking between those pieces, right? Jeremiah 34:18 through 19. And I will give the man who have transgressed my covenant, who have not performed the words of the covenant which they made before me, when they cut the calf in two and passed between the parts of it, the princes of Judah, the princes of Jerusalem, the eunuchs, the priests, and all the people of the land who passed between the parts of the calf, of the heifer, right? That took place. And even though they were not, they were in Abraham's loins. So that covenant was for Abraham and his seed. Understand that, right? Lastly, connecting with verse 18, on the same day, the Adon made a covenant with Abraham, saying, to your descendants. You see what I mean by what we just read in Jeremiah. So to your descendants, I have given this land from the river of Egypt to the great river, the river Euphrates. Connecting with that, we have Genesis 24:7. The Adon, the Elohim of heaven, who took me from my father's house and from the land of my family, and who spoke to me and swore to me, saying, to your descendants I give this land. He will send his angel before you, and you shall take a wife for my son from there. Genesis 12:7. Then the Adon appeared to Abram and said, to your descendants I will give this land. And there he built an altar to the Adon who had appeared to him. Genesis 17:8. Also I give you and your descendants after you the land in which you are a stranger, the land of Canaan, as an everlasting possession. I will be their Elohim. Once again, this is the eternal covenant, right? That I will be their God and they will be my people. Exodus 23:31. And I will set your bounds from the Red Sea to the sea, Philistia, and from the desert to the river. For I will deliver the inhabitants of the land into your hand, and you shall drive them out before you. Numbers 34:3. Your southern border shall be from the wilderness of Zin along the border of Edom. Then your southern border shall extend eastward to the end of the salt sea. Deuteronomy 11:24, every place on which the sole of your foot treads shall be yours, from the wilderness and Lebanon, from the river Euphrates, even to the western sea shall be your territory. And by the way, all these mention of land, seas, places, I believe they've been distorted from the actual map for us to be confused, right? I believe so anyhow. But scripturally, yes, they were the same. Joshua 1:4, from the wilderness and this Lebanon as far as the great river, the river Euphrates, and the land of the Hittites, and so the great sea toward the going down of the sun shall be your territory. All this is just confirming everything that he just promised Abraham, right? Joshua 21:43, so the Adon gave to Israel all the land of which he had sworn to give to their fathers, and they took possession of it and dwelt. So that we see the fulfillment, the first fulfillment there, right? We'll see the second fulfillment with us because that land is the possession of the New Jerusalem, right? Acts 7:5. And the Most High gave him no inheritance in it, not even enough to set his foot on. But even when Abraham had no child, he promised to give it to him for a possession and to his descendants after him. 1 Kings 4:21. So Solomon reigned over all kingdoms from the river to the land of the Philistines as far as the border of Egypt. They brought tribute and served Solomon all the days of his life. Second Chronicles 9:26. So he reigned over all the kings from the river of the land of the Philistines as far as the border of Egypt. So we see even in the times of Solomon, these places were, being fulfilled. Second Kings 24:7. And the king of Egypt did not come out of his land anymore. For the king of Babylon had taken all that belonged to the king of Egypt from the brook of Egypt to the river Euphrates. So now, connecting all of that, let me just see the chat really quick. Sylvia actually had a question, so let me read it. Was the splitting of the offering representing the two houses? Ooh. The Messiah going through both uniting? Ooh, girl, that's deep. You know what? I'm not sure, but that's deep. I mean, I don't think anything in scriptures is just there coincidentally, right? The split of the animals. And it's interesting because also placing them on each side. Ooh, Sylvie, you might be going somewhere with that. All right, so let's go back to the animal pieces. I know here, well, I'll show you the picture a little better later on another slide. But basically, these are basically Messiah's footsteps walking through the blood in between the animal pieces split in two, right? So to summarize all of it, let's do this. Covenant ceremony. So the animals, once again, were divided. Jeremiah 34:18 explains this custom. To pass between pieces meant, may I become like this if I break the covenant. So may I become like what? Like the dead animals. Are you understanding it now? Okay. Messiah walked through it. Remember, may I become like this if I break the covenant. We know Messiah didn't break the covenant, but he became as the unfaithful bride. Are you seeing the full picture? Woo! Yes. All right. So, but Abram does not walk through. That's the key thing to understand. Abraham was in deep sleep in that vision of the night where he is half here, half there, right? Seeing all these things in terror. He does not walk, but Messiah walks, right? A deep sleep falls on him like Adam, like we just read in Genesis 2. A smoking fire pot and flaming torch pass between the pieces. Only the Adon walks through. And I put the Adon, we know that's Messiah. We know that he is, his word is an all-consuming fire, right? So this covenant is unilateral. In other words, it's one-sided. It is not Sinai, it is promise. Okay? We're gonna go somewhere, I promise. So the prophecy of affliction, from verses 13 through 16, the Most High foretells strangers in a land that's not theirs. Pay attention to this, right? Because it's literally what was then, it is now. Nothing new under the sun, right? So strangers in a land that's not theirs, us today, we don't belong in this earth. Enslavement, we are slave of the system, right? 400 years. Exodus 1:11 fulfills this. Acts 7:6 recalls it. Exodus 12:40 mentions the 430 years, right? So the numbers 400 and 430 are symbolic and theological. Genesis 15 is the bridge to Exodus, right? So even Moses naming his son Gershom in Exodus 2:22 echoes stranger, right? So suffering was not interruption, it was foreknown. The iniquity is not yet complete. We see in verse 16, this is crucial. Judgment is delayed. The Amorites are not yet fully corrupt. And Daniel 8:23 echoes this, the sin reaching full measure and the end days, right? In 2nd Maccabees 6:14, we saw how the Most High waits patiently until sin is complete. The Most High is patient. He does not judge prematurely. Justice waits for fullness, which reminds me, I didn't put it, but in the book of, oh my gosh, wait. The prophet, oh my gosh, I'm having a brain fart right now. I can't remember the book of, not Malachi. Ooh, come on, work with me, brain. You know what I'm talking about? The vision, write the vision. Who's this?
Habakkuk.
Habakkuk. Thank you. Woo, brain fart. Completely out of my mind. But yes, the prophet Habakkuk literally asks, he goes into this debate with the Most High, asking, like, what, like all the righteous people are basically going through trouble. Like, Why are you judging your people and why are these people getting away with it? Like, when is their, when is their reward coming? Like, when are you going to judge? And he basically, and by the way, that is completely taken out of context. That's when he says, write the vision on the board. The vision on the board has to do with the end times.
Woo.
It has nothing to do with your own vision, by the way. But let's not go there. But anyway, he tells them, write the vision. And he says, because I will not tardy. In other words, I will not relent. In other words, I will do what I promised. It's just you gotta be patient. It's the same thing as in Second Maccabees that we find in the Apocrypha. It's the same thing. He waits patiently for everything to take its course to be fulfilled. We're living in the times of that actually almost fulfilling, and we might even witness the end of the day, right? But we have to be patient, understanding that justice waits for the fullness to happen. And so we see the land boundaries in verse 18 from the river of Egypt to Euphrates. This is biblically significant. And again, I don't believe is where the map points to today. However, this language appears again, like we read it in Exodus, Joshua, First Kings, Second Chronicles. Solomon's reign is described using Genesis 15 language. Later political realities in Second Kings show how fragile territorial power was. And the land promise stretches beyond any one king. So it is covenant language, in other words. It's not that you hear something on a TikTok, oh, the Euphrates River is almost dry or blah, blah, blah. No, this is covenant language, guys. It will be fulfilled, but not the way we expect it to. So now let's take it back to Hagar and the echo of the star, right? Because in Genesis 15:5, we see that he promises Abram countless descendants, right? But in Genesis 16:10, he gives the same promise to Hagar, like we read earlier. She is the only woman directly promised innumerable descendants. And we'll read more next week, obviously. But her suffering mirrors Israel's future slavery. Remember the son of the flesh? So they go back to slavery, right? So the messenger of the Most High tells her to return, but not without a promise. So her son is named Ishmael, which means the Most High hears, right? Even when he cries, her cries are not recorded, the Most High heard. So the covenant of seed is a larger than one household, which is why I believe it's spiritual. It's through Messiah. It's through the restoration of his promise. So the covenant pattern from Abraham to Messiah, in other words. And by the way, the picture here is more clear. This was the one I was trying to show you, like the blood in between the path, the split animals in two, each on each side. And then Mashiach walking through the blood of these animals, right? Another picture here, like the torch of fire, which is his word. Once again. So Genesis 15 shows us something foundational. The covenant with Abram was entered by faith. This is key. Abram believed, the Most High counted it as righteousness. Abram did not walk between the pieces. He did not seal it with blood. He slept, right? So the Adon alone passed through. This means the covenant was initiated by the Most High, not by any human performance. Lesson. So from promise to blood. So at Mount Sinai, the people entered into covenant. In Exodus 24:8, and I'm going to try to go through this quickly. However, understand that when we get to Exodus, I'm going to break this down because this is key right here. In Exodus 24:8, we see right before the sin of the golden calf, right? And I'm not going to read it entirely, but we see that Moses sprinkles the blood on the people when he read the commandments to them. Okay, and they answer all these things that you said we shall do. They ratified the same covenant that was given to Abraham, this time with blood. They officially entered the covenant that initiated by Mashiach walking through the animal pieces. I don't know if you guys are seeing it, right? So again, Moses sprinkled the blood and said, behold, the blood of the covenant. It's only one covenant. Remember that, right? It's the same covenant spoken to Abraham. So the covenant spoken to Abraham now becomes national, meaning through his descendants, right? But almost immediately, the people broke it. How? The sin of the golden calf took place immediately. And remember, what was the thing that if somebody breaks the covenant, someone had to die?
Yeah.
Are you following me here? Okay. So the covenant was violated before Moses even came down the mountain. Moses interceded. He cried out for mercy. The Most High did not destroy them because he was ready to, by the way. Instead, a priesthood was established, which was the Levitical system. Remember, that priesthood was not in place prior to this. It came as a result of the broken covenant. Understand that. That's why it was only temporary. So, with sacrifices and mediation, the priesthood was temporary and earthly. Galatians later connects Sinai with Hagar. And again, I break this down in the study of Galatians. The Hagar, Paul says she is the bondwoman, representing a covenant connected to bondage, connected through the flesh, right? So, why is the order of Melchizedek important? Remember, we spoke about him last week. Let's bring him back. The man with no origin, right? Which we believe is Shem. However, before Sinai, before Levi, there was Melchizedek, which we saw in Genesis 14. A priest, not by genealogy, a priest connected to promise because of righteousness, right? Psalms 110 speaks of priest forever in that order. Hebrews explains the Messiah comes not from Levi, but from the order of Melchizedek. If the covenant required blood, pay attention to this part. And if someone had to bear the consequence of its violation, then the one who initiates the covenant must also redeem it. I don't know if you're following it. The Messiah, as the word, fulfills what was promised to Abram. He restores the covenant, not abolishing it, but renewing it. Hebrew calls it a better or renewed covenant, not a new promise, but the fulfillment of the original one. Are you guys starting to see the full picture now? Do you understand why chapter 15 is so important to connect it to the rest of our story in scriptures, right? So in other words, in Galatians 3:29, he says, and if you are Messiahs, then you are Abraham's seed and heirs according to promise, right? The restoration to promise. The Levitical priesthood was temporary. The Melchizedek priesthood is eternal. The covenant with Abraham began by faith and it is restored by faith, which is why we must believe in Messiah in order to be grafted in. Are you understanding now? So the Messiah redeems so that the promise given before Sinai can stand secure. Back to promise, back to faith, back to righteousness counted. The covenant was never sustained by human strength. It was sustained by the Most High, and He remains faithful, which is why we're not to do animal sacrifices anymore. We're not to do the things that was done through the temporal Levitical priesthood. Understand that. Luke 1:72 through 73 says, to show mercy to our fathers and to remember his holy covenant, the oath which he swore to our father Abraham. It's the same oath that we just read in Genesis 15, guys. And this is powerful because it directly names the covenant with Abraham. It shows Messiah's coming as the remembering of that oath, and it frames redemption as covenant fulfillment. In other words, restoration is not a new idea. It is the Most High's it is the Most High remembering what He swore. What He swore. It brings everything full circle. Remember at the beginning I said it's gonna do a full circle? Abraham, seed, Messiah, heirs, promise. Whew! Full circle. Full circle, guys. I love it. So the great pattern. Genesis 15 establishes promise before the law, grace before Sinai, faith before works, suffering before inheritance, patience before judgment. The covenant with Abraham is unconditional. The Adon binds himself while Abraham sleeps. Oh, I love it. So in a nutshell, Genesis 15 teaches the Most High keeps promises across generations. Delay is not denial. Suffering does not cancel covenant. Judgment waits until its appointed time, which is what he tells Habakkuk, right? The stars still testify. Twinkle, twinkle. Abram looked up in the night. Israel looked up in exile. We look to the fulfillment in Messiah. The covenant began with a promise of seed. It finds its fullness in the promised one. And the Most High is still our shield and our exceedingly great reward. In other words, do not fear, for I am with you. I will sustain you. I will uphold you with my righteous hand. Amen. Shalom, everyone. I pray this blessed you. I pray truly brought understanding because if you didn't get it, watch it again and again. Take notes, read it. I guarantee you, when you study Hebrews, when you study Galatians and the rest of scriptures, you're going to see the full picture and you're going to understand that why it was so important to enter into the covenant. with the Most High and to remain in that covenant in order to make it into the promised land, the Garden of Eden. We're going back to the beginning, to the tree of life. Shalom, everybody. I pray you are blessed and that you continue on fire, especially in the days and the times that we're living in. Don't disconnect from his ruach, from his word. Thank you for breaking bread with us. Bye-bye.